Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and I am very thankful to have some more beautiful conversations to share with you as we round out this year, 2025, and before we go into a new season of Reiki Radio next year. So, with this year ending, us being so close to it, first of all, I want to say thank you again for being here. Thank you for being part of the community, whether you've been here since 2013 or you are new to the show. I am very thankful that we get to have these conversations and exchanges and learn together in such beautiful ways. And today is no different. So today, it's very personal in a way, I would say. I got to sit down with a beautiful teacher named EFUNLAYO. Her name is actually J. EFUNLAYO Maxey, and she is an experienced Reiki master teacher. She's also an ordained Ifa Yoruba priestess and retired school teacher and administrator. And EFUNLAYO has combined these skills and experiences to create classes, workshops, and a spiritual life coaching practice for adults and children. And I have to tell you, especially with the children's piece, over the years, get emails all the time of people asking, do I know of anyone who teaches how to teach children Reiki or how to have conversations with children around mindfulness and these sorts of things? And Ia Ifanlayo, this is one of her specialties. In fact, a few weeks ago, we had a 3-day masterclass weekend. I'm sure you all heard about it here on Reiki Radio. And one of the classes presented was by her. And it was about how we can share Reiki and energy work and even ancestral connection with children and people who may be neurodiverse. It was a phenomenal class, very informative. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can still access the recordings from the masterclass weekend. So I'll put the link for that down in the show description if you would like to watch EFUNLAYO'S class, including the other 8 that were part of the weekend. But it is her belief that Reiki supports and blends well with all aspects of our lives. And she is the co-founder of the Melanated Reiki Healers Collective, which you may have heard me talk about over the years. I had the honor of speaking at their annual conference a couple of times. And this is a community of practitioners, many of whom receive training from Ia Ifanlayo, and it shares its unique perspective to support both the teaching and practice of Reiki for melanated healers. And we talk a bit about that in this episode. But you can connect with EFUNLAYO on her website at efunlayo.com, and her most recent offering as a podcaster on Awakening Airwaves. You can catch her and Ia Ifatayo on Wisdom from the Elders. So I'll put the link to listen to her podcast down in the show description, along with the link where you can access her masterclass weekend and her website and her Instagram. But I hope you really enjoy this conversation. I believe it is the first time we've had anyone on the show come and talk about African spiritual traditions. So I think you will learn a lot. I had a lot of fun speaking with her. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you on the other side. Hey everyone, on this episode of Reiki Radio, I'm very excited to finally get to have a conversation in interview style with Ia Ifanlayo. I want to just say thank you and welcome finally to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is very exciting for me because I've had an opportunity to work with you and get to know you behind the scenes, but there are certain things about your path I'm sure I don't know, and your work is so incredible. I'm very excited to get to share it with so many people
Oh,
now in
thank
this way.
you.
Yes. So I just want to let people know a couple of things before we begin, because I have mentioned over the years being able to present and speak at the Melanated Reiki Healers Collective. And Ifanlayo is the co-founder of the collective. And so now here she is up front and center, but you're also an ordained priestess in the tradition of Ifa. You obviously teach and practice Reiki, and you are a spiritual life coach. How did this all start for you?
Wow, big question. Um, it began for me growing up in a home where spirituality, specifically related to Christianity, was very much a part of our daily life.
Yes.
And we were what people call a church family.
Hmm.
Both sides of my family, we had a rich history of that. And in addition to Christianity, we had people in the family who practiced Islam
Mm.
and some other more non-traditional, lesser known types of spiritual practices. So it was kind of an eclectic mix of things that we were exposed to, but the root of it was in Christianity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually want to ask you about that in relationship more so to the side of coming into the study and practice of Ifa,
Yes.
because now, and maybe it's been always, but I've only really noticed, I don't know, maybe in the last 10 years, 5, 10 years, that there's been this big desire to reconnect with lineage and roots, and especially in the realm of healing, a lot
Yes.
of people wanting to connect with what was passed on or practiced through their ancestors. So, could you tell everyone just a little bit from your point of view what Ifa is about and what drew you into that?
Okay. Sure. Ifa spiritual practice is a religious spiritual practice from the Yoruba nation of West Africa. And it is something that the Africans brought to the world, all over the world, prior to as well as during the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
And it's a religion or a spiritual practice that is something that you live. It's not something that you just do on the Sabbath day, like Sunday morning, or going to prayer meeting in the middle of the week or something like that. It's a lifestyle. And with that, in Ifa tradition, we believe that there's only one God, one creator, but that creator manifested everything in the universe. And so its energy, its ashe, its chi is in everything that exists. Everything is alive, you know? And most people are familiar with that concept nowadays.
Yes.
And as a result of that, as a practitioner, believe that Ephod was a prophet that lived and walked the earth. And so the tradition was named after Ephah, or Orumila is his actual formal name, because he was the first known person to actually write things down and document the practice. So this practice went on for many years, and there's many documentations that say that it actually came out of Egypt, and as people migrated in different places, they settled, and bits and pieces of different traditions were blended, as we always do when we settle and live with people. But it was more robust and grew in the Yoruba aspect. In Western Nigeria. And as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, many, as you know, people who were enslaved came to the Americas and all the islands in the Americas and South America as well. And so in the specific line of practice that I'm using is called Lukumi, which is the version of the practice that came out of Cuba.
Mm.
But we also have versions or aspects of it that are practiced in other places. People have heard of Santeria and Candomblé, Haitian Voodoo. They're not exactly the same, but they're so similar. They're like sister cousins of that same practice and belief.
Yeah.
And it was preserved in those ways because in during times and in places where the Africans weren't allowed to practice their traditional religions, they synchronized it under Catholicism. So many people are aware of that fact. So we have aspects of the creator that we call Orisha,
Mm,
which is a Yoruba term that means selected head. And that's speaking of the manifestations of God or source energy. And the Yoruba term for that is Olodumare. And so those are aspects of nature, such as the ocean or the river, the trees, the mountain. So all of the energies of the universe, and they have their own consciousness. And so that is what we are honoring. So it's not separate gods,
mhm.
but it's aspects of gods. And so as it syncretized with Catholicism, with the different saints, they have their aspects, right? And so they said, oh, so you're talking about the energy, a pure energy such as fire, that passionate, fiery energy. Oh, we call that Shango.
Mhm.
And so, okay, you want us to call it Santa Barbara? Okay, fine, we'll do that, so that we can do our thing. But underneath, they knew what it was. But over time, and due to circumstances, people kind of lost some of that was brought over because we didn't have it written down in books and things of that nature. And so it sort of morphed in different places because another aspect of the progression of this faith is that many of the enslaved people were split up so that they couldn't communicate. So they were mixed with different tribes and languages. And so what they did in their brilliance, as their ancestors directed, was they blended things.
Yes.
And so we have the practices that are in the diaspora, and then we have the tradition, which is coming out of straight out of Nigeria. So you have another aspect of it, which we call the tradition of Isheshe is what it's called, which is the mother, the root of these practices. I hope that
Okay.
helps.
No, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because one, I've never had a conversation or an interview where anyone shared any of this of any African tradition, I don't believe. But I think it's a very important topic and an important conversation for so many reasons. But it's bringing to mind, just to kind of clarify for people what they may have noticed before I got into, exploration of Reiki or any of this work in this realm. I remember if I would go to, certain spiritualist stores or certain bookstores, and you'll see those candles that have the different saints
Yeah.
associated with Catholicism. Yes. And then I had no idea that there was this connection of these traditions that came out of Africa and then in the slave trade, how they had to use Catholicism as a cover
Yes.
for what their practices were. So I just want to point that out for people who may have seen this but didn't know the association or why or where it came from, because that was fascinating to me to find out when I did. But another thing you bring up, I also am very excited for that we're having this conversation, is a lot of people don't know that during the slave trade, people were forced to not believe what they were raised to believe. So
Exactly.
literally their system of belief and their religion, the philosophies were forcefully taken away and then replaced with
Yes.
Christianity. And
Exactly.
so interestingly though, when you fast forward through time, a lot of these African traditions were demonized
Yes,
and
they are.
like through Hollywood, through just what we were told. And it was like, oh, voodoo and this and all these things. It's so
Black
scary and
magic
horrible.
and all of these
Yes.
things. Yeah.
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 And so it's very interesting now that it seems that it is coming more into the awareness of what is the truth behind all of
Yes.
this, especially with more people being drawn to it. So I want to ask, especially with you growing up in a Christian household, and even though there were other things practiced, when you had this curiosity, like how did this find you? And did you have a bit of tug of war of feeling comfort with accepting what you
Yes.
now know?
Well, I mentioned these other things, right?
Hmm.
And so even though our family was primarily Christian, And because we are African descendants, we did practice some of those other things.
Yes.
However, it was not explained or talked about a lot. And I believe that was because through the passage of time and everything being like passed down verbally, some of the meanings were lost.
Mm.
And we would go, I had a particular aunt who was a spiritualist, and she was also a pastor of a church. She would always know people who were practicing some of the African traditions. And so at different points in time, she would may take you to get a reading or do some spiritual work to clear your energies and find alignment and things like that. But it was never talked about and explained. And one of the reasons for that, as you mentioned, back in times of slavery and after, you could be tortured and killed for practicing any traditional faiths.
Right.
And that was not just if you were African in other traditions, as well, like the witch trials and all those
Right.
things. So it's a similar phenomenon. And so as a result of that, always had questions about, well, what is this? What is that? And I remember when my spirit was drawn to ask questions, it was actually when I was asked to teach Sunday school to the younger children. And so, in true keeping with the way I was raised, you always do your homework, do your research. And so I had to go to the encyclopedia, you know, not Google. We didn't have any of that.
Right.
And so as I began to research the different Christian traditions, I found out that many of those things were made up of aspects of different other religions that they put together to be more palatable to the people in general. And I'm not just talking about people of African descent, this is
Right.
everybody. And so if you've never looked up, the story of Christmas and how it came to be worshipped or practiced the way we do it today with Christmas trees and, balls on the tree and lights, look it up. You will
Oh,
be amazed if you've never looked at it. The same way with Easter and all the holy days, there's
yes.
a story behind them that you will be blown away by. So I
Mhm.
started looking into those things, and then one thing led to another and another. And I began to ask more questions. Okay, so when we go to Brother so and so and he makes a spiritual bath for us or tells us to light this candle or whatever, and that's how my interest began to grow. And as I got older, we had people that would come around and you were able to sit and ask them questions because as a child you just did what you were told.
Right.
You stayed out of grown folks business, right? But as maturity came, and so one thing led to another, and I was drawn to more of the African practices, even though I kind of dibbled and dabbled in a lot of different things. And so there was a conflict there because you always would hear, oh, it's voodoo and that's a negative and it's this and that and the other. And come to find out that's not the truth at all. But it did take a while to undo that programming.
Right.
But the pull towards it was so powerful that I could not deny that that's the direction. And I remember even at a point saying, I prayed for to know my direction, what's my destiny. You really mean this over here? And the answer was, of course, yes. But the other thing I want to say is that once you get past the mystery and understand some of the underlying background of how things evolved the way they did, it's like, oh, okay, so basically you're telling me that there is one God,
Hmm.
but they wanted you to practice the way whoever the dominant religion was, the
Right.
dominant culture wanted you to do things a certain way for control, because we know everything is about politics,
Hmm.
religion and politics. And so that's how I came in. And once I stepped toe in, it wasn't long before I was totally engulfed. However, I did not stop going to the church.
Hmm.
And the reason was I began to understand more of what that was really about. Because you ask the questions, really? A virgin gave birth? Wait a minute. Okay, so Holy Communion, we're doing what?
Yeah.
And you begin to understand the true origins of what some of those things were about, and then you could see more clearly. The other thing that grabbed me was as I began to study Ifa tradition, there were many things that I recognized from growing up. Wait a minute, we always did this or that or the other. And I would read it in a book and I'm like, we did that, but nobody ever explained why. And I would had the fortune of having an older brother, and I would call him and I said, do you remember when so and so, so and he said, yeah. And I said, do you know where that comes from? And that's just made you even more curious to uncover. And as a person of African descent who's cut off from your heritage,
Hmm.
it's always and has become the reason you've seen it grow a lot is because now that we have the internet, you can find out so much more information that was difficult to find before. And so you want to know where you came from.
Right.
What are my origins, you know? And so that's what's also drawn a lot more people into African traditional religions is searching for their roots, searching for understanding of who we are.
Yes. It's so fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day, but you bring up another part of this I think is very important. You know, the tradition and it being, something that stems out of Nigeria. And then on the other side with the diaspora, some people feel like, can I connect with this if I don't know? I wasn't born in Nigeria. And a thing a lot of people I think don't think about unless you are, like a Black American person, there has been for so long this disconnection of
Mhm.
not knowing. I mean, now we can do DNA testing and all of these
Right.
things and find out more about our ancestors. But, to a point, the records that were kept of slaves like were minimal, if at all. So a
Mhm.
lot of people for so long have had no idea of what their, where their family came from or what their ancestry was. And so that's another thing looking at this, I think is so interesting. And I had an opportunity to actually speak with someone who also practices Ifa and they are from Nigeria. And I asked them about that. And they were like, oh, wow, no, we welcome they actually even say they do some things in a way to help support people in the diaspora to
Yes.
understand and
Yeah.
come in and, to learn more. And so that's a big thing again, why I'm so thankful we're having this conversation because even when I came into this realm, there have been there's a lot of knowledge about other cultures. So like through Reiki, we may learn some things about Buddhism and Shintoism. If we come into this realm, you may hear a lot about the different Hindu deities. You may hear a lot about the, European deities, all these ones, but people aren't as familiar with the different energies associated with the African traditions. And when we take away all the fear that has been wrapped around and all the stories that have been wrapped around it, there's so much beauty there that I
It's
think,
amazing.
yes,
It's
yes.
amazing.
So I wanted to
Amazing.
ask you about that. So once you got in and started learning and working with these energies and connecting with this, what did that do to you?
It was amazing. But before I go there, I
Yeah,
must say that Ifa is not the only traditional African
right.
spiritual system. It is one of the largest because there were more enslaved people brought from the Yoruba nation than any other. So
Yeah.
that's why it is one of the most pervasive ones. But all of the different African nations have their spiritual practice. Like I said, they're very similar. So they all have their traditional religious practices,
Hmm.
very similar but different. But that's why Ifa is the one that seems to be the most known, and that's because the most of the millions and millions of enslaved Africans, the majority, the largest groupings were of the Yoruba people. So get to your question of how did it feel? It was the most incredible thing I've ever experienced to connect with African spirituality because of the way that I was raised and the focus being on Christianity,
Hmm.
which didn't feel like me, you know.
Yeah.
And even though I was raised in a black church, even the picture of the Christ was of a white person, you
Yeah.
know. And a funny little story, I remember one time, one of my brothers was asked to do some paint work at the church, and he called me one day and he said, "What do you think? What if I paint and add a little bit of brown each week? Will they notice?" And I said, "You can't do that without talking to the people." But anyway, I think about that every now and then. But to find that we had such a rich spiritual heritage
Right.
that was not that negative thing that was told was captivating.
Mhm.
And I couldn't get enough information. Um, and so it felt like home. And that was what helped me to overcome the negative that I had always heard was because of that connection. Um, and to also understand that in my family, I had the blessing of coming from, especially on my father's side, very, very large family, and they were very, very well connected. And even though when my father's ancestors came to the north, I was raised in Ohio, they stayed connected with their people in the southern states. And they were very, very much into family history and genealogy. And so at a very young age, I was introduced to that.
Mm.
And so that too was fascinating to me to know more about who my people were, not just where they came from in the United States, but just what kind of people were there. What were their morals and their values and things of that nature. And a big part of African traditional religions is ancestor reverence. And so that was a perfect fit, you know. And so when I came in to know that that was like the foundation of everything, I was ahead of the game in that aspect in
Yeah.
terms of knowing what type of people they were. And I remember we used to visit our relatives and they used to visit us. So I really knew them well, much more than on my mother's side, even though I knew a lot of them, but it was a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very, it felt like healing. It felt like home to connect in that way. So, because that during that time we weren't yet at the place where we could do DNA tests
Hmm.
too. So the most you could find was what plantation they may have been on based on where they lived. Or we do have one ancestor on my father's side where we do know that she did come from Africa. She was born in Africa. We don't know which tribe or anything like that, which nation, but we do know that for a fact because it
Yeah.
was a story that was passed down in the family. Yeah.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, if they don't know as well, a lot of prior again to the DNA, but if you want to get a little more detailed about um, your family, once they were here in America, a lot of people find a lot of records through the churches.
Yes.
So, yeah, I just want to put that out there for people who may be doing some
Yeah.
research and don't know that oftentimes the churches kept records
And
down. So,
everything's online now, and
yeah.
it's great. And the biggest database of genealogy in the entire world is through the Mormon Church.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, and so I had the beautiful opportunity to go to Utah to their
Oh,
campus there
wow.
because for a while I was like an amateur genealogist, and so there was a Black Genealogy Society, and they had a conference every 2 years, and one year we went there to do research, and it was just fascinating the amount of information that they have on every country. And even as I've traveled in different places in the world, you'll run into them and they're there doing their research.
Right.
It's really
Because aren't
an
they
amazing
the
thing.
ones that own Ancestry?
No.
The I thought
Um,
they owned Ancestry
what
dot
is it?
com.
Family Search. That's the only one that comes to mind right now.
Oh,
Maybe they do own Ancestry. I don't know. I don't use Ancestry. I used 2 years ago, but
yeah,
there's so many different ones now,
right.
but they have the biggest database
Hmm.
of all. And they're very helpful when you go there and you need help. Their genealogists there are, it's totally free and that kind of thing. So if you're looking for your people, but when we did do on our DNA, even though I connected with this Nigerian spiritual practice, found out on my father's side we have Igbo, which is another aspect of Nigerian culture, the Igbo people. So we're close in there. And I want to say this too, that for people to understand that even though you may not know for sure where your people come from, when you look at the history of humanity, we're all mixed
Hmm.
all over the place, for a lot of different reasons. I don't want to go there, but the point is, if the important thing is what you connect with, what
Right.
feels like home to you. So because I have met people in time that, well, I don't know if I should do that because maybe that's not where my people came from. We were mixed around the world for a reason,
Yeah.
and whatever feels like home to you, we may never know where we actually came from, and at a certain point it really doesn't matter.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
find yourself and you find a place of comfort. So it was exciting to find out that I had Igbo, in there, but there were some other African aspects as well as European and other cultures and on my mother's side too. But the most important thing is that what you connect with.
Yeah.
Because I believe that we have our biological DNA, and I believe we have a spiritual DNA. I
Yes.
really do.
Well, you bring up a nice transition into the other part of, well, I shouldn't just say other, not, I mean, there could be a lot of pieces, but part of your spiritual practice is Reiki, and it's
Yes.
how I found you, of course. And interestingly, even with what you're saying, this is practiced globally and probably more outside of Japan, more in the West than even in Japan itself,
Mhm.
right? And, I know that a lot of people do try to, of course, because a lot of what we learn in the system stems from, the Japanese culture and again, some Buddhism and Shintoism and these things. And we really do try to have, reverence and honoring where it comes from. But also, I think there's a point of view as if I think a lot of people think like Reiki is the birth of energy work, not
Mhm.
knowing that people were practicing and working with energy way before and in all cultures and all of these different things. So I bring this up to say because Ashe. I remember the first times when I've heard it, people would say it almost like Ashe. It sounded more like a an acknowledgement. You would say something and someone would say Ashe. So I had no idea that it was very, like the same as energy or life
Right.
force or this type of
Right.
thing. So I wanted to ask, could you, one, share with people what Ashe is, but then do you notice any kind of similarities? Has any of your practice of Ifa helped you understand energy work or Reiki differently or vice versa?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ashe is the same as chi, prana. It's power, it's life force. And people use it as like um, an agreement.
Hmm.
Ashe, power to that. I am in
Yes.
agreement with that. Yeah. Um, and also, as you said, there are many systems of energy healing that existed before Reiki, even in Japan, as we know,
Yes.
but also throughout humanity,
Right.
human touch. We cannot live without it. There are so many studies over so many decades about that fact. And so it's some of it has a name and some it doesn't. And I've done a lot of research trying to find the different aspects of African traditions that do energy healing. So I've got some information. I'm still working on that piece, but I'm like, there has to be some systems in place, but most of it was informal. But I did find some. We'll have to talk about that another day.
Yeah.
But Reiki, in the beginning, when I was first introduced to Reiki, I didn't get it. I really
Mm.
didn't understand it. But over time, I began to understand that because I believe in only one creative source that emanates in so many different aspects, I began to realize, wait a minute, we're talking about the same source energy here. There's
Right.
only one. And also, a lot of times I get asked, and I do teach this in my Reiki classes, um, why you are you as an African person and someone who practices an African spiritual system teaching a Japanese um, aspect of healing? And my answer to that is that it works.
Hmm.
And if I truly believe that there's only one source, then that's the answer right there. Now, there are people who have developed some more African-centered Reiki practices, Kemetic in specific, as well as some others. But at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so again, it's like what works for you. And even at the point where I did take some classes in a Kemetic Reiki system, and it was excellent. I enjoyed it, but I had to make a decision at a point. Okay, I'm going to continue over there or I'm going to continue where I am. Well, at the point of that decision, I had already become a level 3 practitioner and teacher in the Usui system. And I decided, this is working fine for me. I don't need to change it,
Yeah.
because I already infuse my Reiki understanding with my spiritual practice. And so it's not, oh, this Reiki over here and my spiritual practice over there. It's all together. But it did take me time to work that out in my head
Hmm.
to fit, because in our Western training, we're taught things are separate.
Right.
I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. But I have to ask you too, because I always say, and anyone who's heard me speak of you, you know, I'm so thankful that you are a part of my life and a part of my path now. And I tell you all the time, I don't think I could ever express the excitement of knowing that the Melanated Reiki Healers Collective existed. And so when you all reached out to me years ago, I said, what? I couldn't. Oh my goodness. So I want to talk to you about this as well. Would love to know how Reiki found you, how this became a part of your path and practice, and then the beautiful development of the Melanated Reiki Healers Collective. And I have to say, too, the love in that group and everything I've had the, honor of attending that you all host and hold is just so incredible to me. My mind is blown every single time.
Thank
So
you.
thank goodness for the creation of it. But what brought you into Reiki? How did Reiki find you?
Well, first, I need to say to you that I was just as excited when I found you. I was looking for some podcasts on Reiki, and then I saw you, and I'm like, what? There's this African descendant woman, and she's on the Reiki radio. I called everybody. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. Now, my Reiki master teacher is a person of African descent. And but in our Reiki world here in South Florida, there were very few of us. I will
Right.
say that. But anyway, to your question, I had in my early years, like in my 20s and 30s, I had some different health challenges.
Mhm.
And so I was on this quest to find some alternative medical resources, because I had gone past the thing of surgeries and medications and all of that. So I'm looking for these things. And so I wound up studying a lot of different healing modalities. And I kept hearing about Reiki, but it didn't call me to it. So over a course of many years, Reiki finally caught up with me and say, "Excuse me, we're trying to get your attention." And it was at a metaphysical center that I worked out of, doing spiritual readings and spiritual life coaching and that kind of thing, where I met this woman who was a metaphysical systems practitioner and a Reiki practitioner. She was a Reiki master teacher. And I said to her that one day I'll probably take some Reiki. And she said, okay. And it just so happened that that weekend she was teaching Reiki, and somebody was staying at my house from out of town. We had had a conference, and they had to go for the class, and she didn't know how to get there. It was long story short, I wound up taking her to the session and had no intention of staying. I was going to go find a chair and curl up and take a nap. I was exhausted. But true to being the way I was raised, you don't go in someone's home without speaking. So I went back to speak, to say hello, and then I was going to disappear. And she says, "Oh, EFUNLAYO, we've been waiting for you." I'm like, "Am I late or whatever?" She says, "No, here's your seat." I said, "Oh, I didn't register for the class." She said, "Oh, no, it's fine. Oh, well, I don't have the money to register." And she kept saying, "No, sit down, sit down." And it was like just this energy overtook me, and I heard this voice say, "Sit down." So, working towards being obedient to guidance, I sat down. And when she started talking about Reiki and how she said the first thing is about focus is healing of yourself, it was like this energy just came over me, and I was alert and awake, and my life was never the same after that night. And what I know happened was that it was just time. It was my time to discover Reiki. And so I wound up studying under her, finished all of my Reiki training with this one person. That first class was a group class. All my other training was one-on-one. So I had her full attention in that aspect. And so that's how I came to Reiki. And then as things moved on and I started having Reiki clients, my spiritual teacher started sending clients to me saying that this person, when she would do spiritual consultations, say this person could use some energy healing. And she started sending people to me. And that was the first time when I started to see the blend
Mm.
was because she's doing readings in our EFA system and recommending people from the reading to come and get some Reiki healing. And that was the beginning of me seeing how the two worked hand in hand. And from there, the rest was history. My teacher, at a point, I was having a lot of issues adjusting to the energy of working with others.
Mm.
And I said, I can't do this. I just can't. I would have all these different feelings, and sometimes I felt like I'm leaving my body and, just a lot of different things. And so I said, I think it's just for me. I'm just going to work on it. She said, absolutely not. She said, our next class is teaching you how to, conserve your energy and, ground and whatever, whatever. And so she taught me that. And then we went on from there. Yeah.
That's incredible. It's so interesting woven throughout everything you say. There's this researcher clearly that's just part of who you are. You're like, I researched, I studied, I went deeper, I researched, right?
Yeah.
And that in you saying that, I have to mention as well, you also were a teacher prior
Yeah.
to this. I mean, a school teacher. And one of the beautiful things that you help people understand, even through the lens of Reiki, is how to share and teach these practices to younger people, children, people that may be neurodiverse in any type of way. I wanted to know if you could share a little bit about that, your background with teaching and how that has even supported the way that you help others translate this work to everyone.
Great. I love talking about that. So I come from a long line of teachers, and so I aspired to be a teacher as well. So I studied education. And when I began to work with children, my background is in special education. So I started to work with children. And during that time that I was working with children, when I first started out, you had people who were born with severe disabilities, both physical, mental, and emotional. And the tradition then was you, depending on the degree of their challenge, that don't take the baby home, don't get attached, you send them to an institution. That's how things
Wow.
were back then. And to go to school, you had to be toilet trained and ambulatory. So that excluded a lot of kids. And I remember one year when I was a classroom teacher, I had a young boy who had an extensive surgery, and so he's going to be out of school for a couple of months. So they asked me if I would be his home instructor, and I said, sure. So I started going to the home. I loved it because not only was I able to go and continue helping him, I was able to interact with his family to help them know how to help him.
Mhm.
And that's when I fell in love with working with the whole family. So I taught 2 years in a classroom. Didn't really go well for me. I didn't, it was just too confining. But then I discovered home instruction. And so over the course of a number of years, I worked with primarily infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And I did intake. So I did the testing to qualify them for the services. And I worked with a team of occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, counselors, nurses to help the family bring their children home and be able to work with them at home. So it was basic things like custodial things, how to deal with whatever disability they had physically, to manage that in the home and to teach them with feeding and communication and just every aspect of the child's life. And so by doing that, I dealt a lot with families and their feelings about having a child that had challenges and how they fit into the family or didn't fit into the family. And because I did the intake piece as well, I learned a lot about the family history. And so what happened there is I began to see and connect with these children, and sometimes they would be communicating with me telepathically. And I learned that just because they're in a body that doesn't work the way we think it should, or that they've been determined to be what the term was back then, mentally retarded, there's nothing wrong with their spirit.
Mhm.
And it just was fascinating to me. And so, because I couldn't just say, well, tell the families or the teachers, I had to find a way to help translate what I saw and what they were showing me into being able to help the family as well as the therapist understand how to help this child. And it just was so amazing to understand that just because you have a body that doesn't function in a typical manner, or that somebody determined that your mind was retarded,
Yeah.
that your spirit was intact. And so with that came the understanding that we all have a destiny. So this was all those beginnings were before I came into my spiritual practice, right? So once I came into my spiritual practice, our belief is that you choose your destiny before your incarnation. And so you choose the family you're going to be born into, you choose the experiences you're going to have, and all of those things are part of the destiny you choose to elevate your spirit, your soul, to fulfill why it was sent forth in the first place. So once that came, it was like, oh my goodness, seeing the big picture, and it made so much sense to me as opposed to you live one time and that's it. I already believed in reincarnation, but to see how it plays out. And so one of the profound experiences I had was a little girl who was born with Down syndrome, and she had a severe heart defect. So she had multiple surgeries. And we used to lose a lot of kids in their early years because of the medical conditions they were challenged with. So you got used to death. But also in my background, I was raised in a funeral home. My father was a mortician and funeral director. So death had a different kind of thing to me. It wasn't scary or all that kind of thing. And so being able to deal with that from the standpoint of understanding that babies die, why do they die? But they came in and they fulfilled their destiny. And when they did what they came to do, they would leave. So I had this family, and we're standing in the hallway one day at the center, and the mother was saying she's going to have another surgery. And this young child's looking at me, and she's saying, I'm not going to make it through the surgery. And I'm like, why are you telling me this?
Wow.
And I'm just like, why are you doing this to me? Because normally it would just happen, or I'd get a feeling it's going to happen or something like that. But she's telling me that this is going to happen. So, of course, I couldn't show any reaction. I couldn't say anything to anybody. So she didn't make it. Her mom calls. I'm the one to go tell the staff. So what that did is it helped me to be able to know how to prepare them because some of them had, this was going to be the first experience they had with losing one of their children that they worked with. And
Yeah.
it's very difficult when you first get used to that. And what happened in that family was the family was a mess. Okay. That's the only way to say it. They were a mess. It was a huge family, had a lot of kids, and the family was falling apart. When this child came into their life, everybody galvanized around this baby because she was so needy on so many levels. Even the grandparents got on board on both sides. That family shifted and completely transformed. And then she left.
Yeah.
It was like, what? She came to save that family, to give them an opportunity to recognize what's really important. And then she exited,
Yeah.
you know? And that thing just shifted my whole consciousness about what life is about. And even though I accepted the fact that people of all different ages and stages of life, they're going to leave. We didn't come here to live forever, and some of us come in different conditions and whatever. But that particular experience helped me to understand life from a whole different perspective and to understand spirituality from a different perspective. So as I said, we believe in my faith that you choose your destiny. She chose that. And she showed me that each and in every individual, no matter how severely challenged they might be, they chose their destiny. I had another little boy who was born with a condition that thankfully we don't see much anymore, hydrocephalus, which is waterhead.
Mm.
His head was so large. He was a little tiny guy. I think it was maybe like a year and a half or something like that. His head was so large he could not move his head.
Oh.
And he could not speak or anything. And every week when I would go to his home, he would cry, little tears rolling down his face, and he would make this little sound. And he was in a foster home, and the foster mother said to me that she had had him since birth, and she said he had never cried before until I came. And I never understood why, but there was something about him that kept connected me in my heart chakra. And he would cry, and I would just look in his eyes and I would say, tell me, what is it? But he never told me. But I had the distinct feeling that this child and I had a past life together or something like that. It had to be
Mhm.
because I felt him and he would cry every time he saw me, but he never told me what it was about. So, what does this have to do with Reiki? What it has to do with Reiki to me is that Reiki and spirituality go together because I believe that our whole purpose for coming on this in this incarnation is to find our purpose, whatever that might be, and connect with source energy to understand it, and then to follow whatever the path is that we laid out. We believe in our faith that when you come through the birth canal, you forget why you were coming. Because if you remember, there would be many things on the day it was destined for you to do. It was like, oh no, I'm not doing that, you know. And then you would not only change your destiny, but everyone else that's connected to you. And so that's why we have deja vu, or we meet people and we think we know them. We have prophetic dreams and all those, because those are some of the memories from the incarnation before we came in, and also different other incarnations. And so, how Reiki fits that to me is our goal is in this body and in our spirit is to be in alignment with source energy so that we can channel and understand and know why we're here.
Yes.
And so, when if Reiki can help you by balancing your chakras and clearing your meridians and helping to clear your consciousness, then that's the purpose of it. And that's why it's a spiritual practice to me, you know? So I
Mhm.
hope that answers.
Yes, I'm smiling because I literally, it was like on my heart to say this in the alchemy circle just last night. I said this to them. I was like, it's a beautiful modality and that we get to use it to support others in healing, even that it has become so well received and recognized that it's being complementary even in
Yeah,
traditional medical settings.
yes.
All of this is phenomenal. And I was like, but the greatest gift is what it helps us to recognize and
Yes.
realize in who and what we are and why we came, and helping us to be guided more clearly through that. So there's so much that you said. I'm like, this is incredible. And it ties back into something you said a little while ago. It's all the same source.
Mhm.
And I think that is so important for us to remember, because I think of how divisive things have been historically with like religion, very divisive and separating, you know. And then in the realm of spirituality, I remember there being kind of this overarching idea that, oh, everyone is one and everything is one. But then as you get deeper into communities, you see there's still a lot of kind of like, well, my version is better than your version. And not, I was
Yeah,
like, oh, no, this is not
yeah,
the way we're supposed to go. So I love that everything that you're sharing, it all weaves back to, no matter what our practice looks like, no matter where it comes from, no matter whatever the case may be, the different translations,
right.
it's all,
All coming from the one. And when you look at the amount of diversity in nature,
yeah,
come on, what
yeah,
are we doing here? You know? And you asked me about the melanated Reiki healers. So,
yes,
how can I do this quickly? I was raised during the time of segregation,
hmm,
and it was a beautiful thing. It really was. Um, and as things shifted and changed after and during the civil rights movement, um, in many places that I found myself, I was the only person of color.
hmm,
Um, and if anybody who's ever listens to this podcast has ever been the only, whether it was the only female, the only male, the only person of color, or whatever you might have been, you understand that it's sometimes a challenge to make a connection,
hmm,
to really communicate with people. So when it comes to the melanated Reiki healers, we were doing Reiki shares, and Reiki shares are where Reiki healers come together to share information, but also to share healing, doing healing for each other. And we got asked to go do a Reiki circle at it was a yoga day, a Black yoga day, yoga teachers day. And when we went, the lady asked me, well, what do you call yourselves? And we didn't really have a name. And so we just made up a name, and it didn't have anything to do with melanated. But then we got asked to come to a library and do a Reiki circle. So because of the library's newsletter, there were people of all different cultures that came, which was fine. But then they started asking us about, well, how we want to learn Reiki and whatever, whatever. And so we had a conversation about opening up our circle that we had
hmm,
to other people. And we decided consciously, we had several conversations that we wanted to have our group just for people who were melanated. And we all started to call it African, but then we said, no, we don't want to do that. But we wanted to, I think people, because of the word melanated, even though there are a lot of melanated people that aren't necessarily straight from the motherland. But we decided we needed that camaraderie, that sanctity, because when you are with people who are more like yourself, there's a connection that you may, as much as you may love and get along well with other people, that you can only have with people who are more like you. And we made a conscious decision on that so that we would not have to always be explaining ourselves, because there's a vernacular that goes along with culture.
hmm,
And so rather than lose that, we decided to keep our group closed. Now, in our Reiki circles that we were doing in the community, everyone is welcome.
yeah,
But we had to, because a Reiki share is like heal the healer. And so it's something that has to have enough meaning to you to want to be there, where you feel that you can truly be all that you need to be. You can open yourself and people will understand you without having to explain yourself. So I hope that's a, you know,
no, you make me think of this example. I, I'm originally from DC, but I grew up primarily in Massachusetts, and then now I live in Southern California. And for anyone who doesn't understand what you're conveying, this really struck me, I think, the most during, I guess, like the height of COVID and Black Lives Matter. All of that was happening, around the same time. And I was in Southern California at first, but then I had to go back home to DC because of funerals and all kinds of things. And at that time, I knew there was tension in my body because there were a lot of spaces where I was the only person of color. Just, it was so. And it's almost like it becomes like unconscious, like you're aware of it, but you
Hmm.
don't really fully understand or recognize the level of tension you hold, how you're on
Yes.
high alert, you're like hyper aware.
Right.
You already know that, there are eyes on you and projections
Assumptions
and
made about
assumptions.
you.
And yes. And so it causes a lot of, and I want to say so many of us, we carry that tension so regularly that it almost becomes like a dull hum in the background. You don't
Yes.
realize.
Yeah.
And then when I went back home, I went to DC and I got off the plane. And anyone who doesn't know, that area is primarily Black. I mean, it's not, I definitely, it's like, I noticed the way the tension left my body.
Mhm.
And it was because I wasn't the only one. So it's
Yes.
almost like I could just blend in the crowd. There was not,
You can
and
relax.
I could relax. And so in that period, from 2020 to 2023, I was bouncing back and forth from Southern California to DC. And it became it was like a wild thing to me to realize, like, God, every time I land back in the DMV, my whole body just relaxes. Everything in me surrenders because I'm not sticking out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Nobody's even paying attention to, I just like, I'm not, yes. And so I say that to say for people, when we think about healing spaces,
Yeah.
I mean, what other environment do you need to feel the most relaxed, the most comforted, the most held? And so, no, I think it's a very important thing. And it's not everyone's experience, but for people who have that experience, it's nice to be able to be in a space where you can completely relax, especially when you can't necessarily in everyday life.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is why I was so excited when you all reached out to me and I saw you existed. Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So this is a great segue too, because there's more about your work I want to make sure people are aware of. And before we even get to that, I have to thank you again so much for everything you have shared in this hour with us.
Thank you.
I think it's very important, and you know how much I love you, I admire you, and your work is phenomenal, and I'm just excited. More eyeballs on you. But speaking of this, and even diversity within the realm of Reiki. So obviously, we know again it's practiced globally,
Yeah.
and in the mainstream of Reiki, initially, I mean, I don't even know what it is anymore, but initially, the mainstream of it, you really didn't see that much diversity, like in terms of who's well known in the
Hmm.
Reiki community. And so, I ended up finding out now that there are a lot of like groups of people in different cultures that have their own kind of like Reiki bubbles for the same thing of what you've just shared. But the truth is, like, we're all here.
Yes.
And so, you currently do an incredible podcast with Ia Ifatayo, Ifatayo White. I'm sure some of you listening are familiar with her as well. The two of you have this incredible, where you all have the best conversations, like the most recent, where you were sharing your different experiences with Reiki and spirit guides, and you
Yes.
all will have like differences, but it's a beautiful conversation. Everyone go listen to their podcast. But she also invited us, I guess last year, to contribute to
Oh, yes.
her book. Yeah, it's an anthology. I still haven't opened the package because I want to do a video of it.
Yeah.
But we got to contribute to share our Reiki stories. And I will put the link for the book, of course, down in the show description. But I just want everyone to know that that exists as well. If you are someone as like, where's my voice in this? Where is my
Yes.
story in this? This book is full of that. And it's a beautiful offering. But could you tell us a little bit about the podcast, Wisdom of the
Oh,
Elders?
yes, I tell you, when you invited me to be a part of Awakening Airwaves, it was like, me? Oh my gosh, I had never done any podcasting before. And it was like, well, it's Yolanda, I have to say yes. And then you came up with the idea of Wisdom of the Elders, and you had introduced me to Ife Tayo. And I tell you, our podcast is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's so enriching for me on a personal level as well. And our podcast, we come up with ideas of what a topic is going to be, and we just talk. We don't do any research or anything like that. We're talking from our own personal experiences. And I think that's what's the fun of it.
Mhm.
Because as you mentioned, I'm a person, I like to research everything. And so it's like an opportunity to just what you call freestyle it.
Yeah.
So we'll come up with a topic and then we get on. I don't know what she's going to say. She doesn't know what I'm going to say. The most we ever do is say, let's make sure we talk about this or that. We'll have maybe one or two bullet points. And then we just go for it. And it's been incredible how much I've learned from doing that with
Mhm.
her, and how so many people have said they've gotten a lot out of it. And I think it also lends itself to how we can share information just from our own personal experience without having to be so-called expert or somebody who has done a lot of research on something. It's just real,
Yes.
and it's valid because it's my experience.
Mhm.
It's not something I have to prove. It is because it is. And
Right.
I think that's where the magic is with the podcast of Wisdom of the Elders. So it's been a great experience and a way to share that I would have never thought of,
Oh,
actually.
it's incredible. And it's funny because we've talked a lot about, culture and these sorts of things. As listening to you talk about the podcast, I think that's one of the things it felt so important also to have your voices heard, the two of you, because I think that's a big part of our culture too. I think of the reverence, like we grow up with such a
Yeah,
reverence and respect for our elders
elders.
and
Yes.
their experience and just, their wisdom. So it just seemed like, yeah, no, this makes sense, to hear what, yeah, we may all study and practice and we all have our unique experiences from that, but you all have the practice, life experience. You all just have a lot of wisdom of life lived. And so I think that's a gift to all of us that we get to hear your perspectives and even what you shared today. There's so much wisdom in what you shared with us here today. And I just feel like we're so fortunate to get access to this type of information, these voices, these perspectives. So
Thank you.
definitely, of course, I'm going to put the link for that down in the show description. But another thing, one, I would love for you to share how people can work with you, but I'm also going to put the link for the masterclass weekend we just did because in there you shared an incredible class of how to share Reiki and energy work with all people. And I have to tell you, I was so shocked in the class of not was it wasn't just about how to share energy healing with children, which a lot of people wonder about, and you gave great tools and examples of how to do this, but you also wove in that key of ancestry and
Yes.
children feeling a sense of belonging and how we can do that as well. So it was a phenomenal class. So I want to
Thank
put the link for that. Yeah. But how can people work with you? What do you offer?
Well, I do teach the traditional Reiki classes, levels 1, 2, and 3 for adults and for children. Most of the children that I work with are at least 9 and older,
Hmm.
and that's because a lot of it is online. So working with younger children, of course, would be more effective in person. I have worked with younger children. But most of my work has been with teenagers, which is fascinating to introduce them to the world of energy healing and spirituality. And so you can work with me. I have a website, and as Yolanda said, she'll put that in the program notes. And also, I teach, I'm doing a class. As a result of Awakening Airwaves, I decided to do a class for Reiki practitioners who are parents
Oh, nice.
and how to bring that Reiki to the whole family. And that comes from my experience, working with families and also I always focus on people with different learning styles and needs because that's part of my background as well. And then I'm also doing a class for Reiki practitioners who are teachers and how you can use Reiki in your classroom. And one of the things that happens with that is people will say, well, I can't Reiki the kids without their parents' permission. We're not talking about Reikiing the kids. We're talking about Reikiing the environment and yourself.
Yeah.
So you are Reiki when you step into that room, and Reiki is in the room. And that comes from my background in Christianity. I remember the years that I taught school, and even after I started doing home instruction, I was always taught to go and pray in the space
Mm,
and bless the space. So Reiki is prayer, Reiki is blessing. So it all kind of, fits in together. You can see the thread of how Reiki was already always there in my life,
yeah.
but even just under different understanding, a different title. And so with my spiritual life coaching, that came out of having clients that would come to me as a priestess to people interested in African spiritual practices, but a little bit concerned about how to do that. Is this for me? And so since I went through that,
Yeah.
I could help them bridge the gap. Get over their trepidations and decide if this is for you or not.
Yeah.
So I that's what I do in my spiritual life practice. But even beyond that, I use a lot of what I've learned from Reiki, teaching Reiki as a part of that, because helping people to understand how you can bring your Reiki into your whole life. It doesn't have to be this separate piece. So that's those are some of the things that I do.
It's incredible. And I am excited again, finally, after all these years that you said, yes, I will come and let you interview me. I do.
Oh,
I've been,
could I
oh,
say one
yes.
other thing?
Yes, please.
I just remembered, a lot of the kids that I work with are kids who have neurodiversity.
Yeah.
And in fact, what reminded me is this Sunday, I have a class that I'm doing for a group of boys who have autism. They live in a group home. And so we'll be going there to teach them Reiki. And one of the things that happened is that there's a new manager at the home, and she told the agency that we work through, they get grants for us to go in and teach. And she says, well, these kids can't learn Reiki. And I got so angry. It's like, excuse me. So I said, do I need to call her? And she says, no, I took care of it. And I said, okay, great. I said, because the worst thing you can do with me is tell me somebody can't do something.
Yes.
I don't believe in that. There's always a way to include somebody in some aspect of what you're doing. And full circle in terms of my life experience, as a grandmother, my grandchild is on the autism spectrum. And so I started doing Reiki for him from the beginning, even before we knew something was a little different for him, but didn't know exactly what it was, of course. But from the beginning of his life, doing Reiki and involving him in it and that kind of thing. So that's why I focus my talks to always be inclusive for people of different abilities. I call them differently abled.
Yes. That is so beautiful. Again, I mean, I think a lot of what you shared today will have a lot of light bulbs go off for people, have a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity. I know that in your work, you definitely are giving that gift of having us be much more open-minded and stop putting all these rigidity and wherever these stories of limitation came from, really breaking all of that down. And so, and, again, it is an honor for me to get to say, everybody, here she is. Here she is. And you can work with her. Her website is efunlayo.com. You can also find her on Instagram at efunlayo. But again, I will put all of that in the show description, and a link to the book, a link to your beautiful lecture that you taught us all about how to share Reiki with all people. I thank you for your work. And again, I'm so thankful that you're a part of my path now. I'm not trying not
Thank
to get
you.
all sappy, but thank you for coming to have this conversation. I think it's a really important one.
Thank you for having me and thank you for what you do because I wouldn't be here if you weren't out there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much and your work that you do in the world.
Thank you. We got to go be sappy in private now. Thank you all for joining us today. And be sure to connect with Ia Ifanlayo down in the show description. Thank you. Okay, beautiful alchemist. I just want to thank Ia Ifanlayo again for coming to have this beautiful conversation with us today. As you can tell, I was so thankful, very happy, and hopefully you learned a lot in this conversation. As always, don't forget you can learn more about her and her work at efunlayo.com. The link is down in the show description. You can also still access her masterclass along with the other 8 masterclasses. The link for that is down in the show description as well. And then, of course, check out her podcast, Wisdom of the Elders, which is phenomenal. They have such incredible conversations. I will put the link for that down in the show description as well. So I hope that you all have a beautiful, beautiful week. Don't forget, if you want to know about the energy of December, you can also find on Awakening Airwaves a beautiful show called Astrology with Erin. And she goes through the astrology of the month, including horoscopes for all 12 signs. You can also watch my Energy of the Month update on Reiki Radio's YouTube, or you can also sign up for my newsletter where you get access to the Energy of the Month, as well as some free downloads and all of those beautiful things. In terms of what is coming up, if you would like to work with me, the last and final offer right now is to join the Alchemy Circle, and the classes for that start officially in January, although we will be meeting on the winter solstice, which is on a Sunday this year, December 21st. So if you don't want to miss it, be sure to sign up for the Alchemy Circle. I'll see you on the solstice, and I look forward to working with you in the new year. I will see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.